Do we have a first aid kit?
Around here somewhere. Why? Did you hurt yourself?
No, some kid got his arm stuck in the popcorn machine.
Oh, no. Is everyone okay?
I think so. It's just a little cut. Some bleeding.
Some bleeding?
Nothing to worry about. Also, where do we keep the big mop?
Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, big movies, small movies. Rob, it is that time of year again.
Already?
It is.
Seems like every time we turn around, it's some time of year.
Well, this time of year has a Spirit Halloween store popping up next to Rewind Video here in the strip mall. Candy is lining the shelves at the grocery store. Demons and ghouls are murdering townsfolk left and right.
Happens all the time.
Halloween is right around the corner. So last year, we devoted a whole episode to movies featuring Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. And we spent the following 12 months hailing Satan in just about every episode. 12 months later, you and I are still in charge of keeping the staff recommendation shelf stocked with films that deserve our customers' attention. Each time we choose 6 movies, we adhere to a theme. And with spooky season upon us again, this week's theme is blood.
It's just a flesh wound.
Indeed. So I think one of the reasons this theme was appealing is because there's more than one way to interpret blood. It could refer to the red stuff flowing through our veins. It could refer to like hereditary, blood relatives. I know that I happen to choose 3 movies that fit into the former of those 2 categories, but there was more than one way to go.
I did not pick a movie that fits into this category, but you could use blood as like a blood oath or something. But
that's true.
I didn't go that direction. I actually think I have actual blood in all of my movies.
Yes, likewise. In fact, lots of it in at least one case. How do you feel about movies that are especially bloody? In the case of horror movies, does it add to the sense of fright for you, or?
I think it in a lot of ways diminishes it.
Oh, yeah?
It makes it seem more fake.
So,
especially when it's an extreme version, like one of the movies we'll be talking about later tonight.
Yeah, I am a fan of body horror when it's done right. Like David Cronenberg has some great body horror movies, and yeah, I think blood, when it's used with some discretion, can make a movie more frightening. But too much gets wacky real fast.
Yeah, which I'm not against that either.
Yeah, no, wacky can be good.
Yeah, wacky can be good.
Yeah.
Cartoonish can be good.
Well, I'm excited by the picks that we have. I know your 3, I know my 3, and I think there's 6 bloody good times in store for our audience.
Might get a little sloppy.
Maybe more than a little, but nevertheless fun. So
absolutely.
Why don't you get us started with your first pick?
I'm going to start us off in 1987. My pick is RoboCop. You can find this in the tourism section of the store. Here's the back of the box. This is the original RoboCop, of course. There is a remake.
There is a remake. Now, in reference to it being the original, I'm curious which version of the original you chose, because there's the R-rated version, and then there's the slightly harder to find unrated version.
Slightly harder. We do have it here at the store.
Yeah.
You can get it on Blu-ray.
Okay.
And DVD maybe even.
Maybe DVD, yeah.
Here's the back of the box. In a dystopic and crime-ridden Detroit, a terminally wounded cop returns to the force as a powerful cyborg haunted by submerged memories. Tagline, part man, part machine, all cop. The future of law enforcement.
That's a serviceable tagline. I mean, that does a good job.
Yeah. I don't even think you need the last sentence.
I don't think you do.
They put it there. RoboCop is, of course, Paul Verhoeven's science fiction classic about a cop who, after being basically blown to pieces by a criminal gang, is rebuilt by a mega corporation, Omni Consumer Products, into an unstoppable crime-fighting machine. This is a crazy satire that imagines a dystopian future where things like hospitals and prisons and space exploration have been privatized.
How bananas is
yeah,
that?
yeah, crazy. Oh, yeah, but this company basically controls life in Detroit and is using it as a testing ground for their technology.
Yeah.
And their corporate values are pretty well summed up by a line of dialogue, which is service contracts, spare parts for 25 years. Who cares if it works? Which is very much the corporate ethos in a nutshell.
Yes.
So this is Verhoeven's first movie after he had moved to America. And it seems to me like he was appalled by what he saw here. Because the main theme of this movie is America is fucked up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely what he's trying to say.
Yeah, the world.
And he's right.
Yeah. I mean, he saw what was coming. The world of RoboCop is a gnarly place. Even the corporate headquarters, where is the one place that should be nice. They have all the money, and even that is like bland and ugly. According to Verhoeven, America is a very trashy and campy version of real life in other places.
It's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like an amusement park version of what life is like.
Right.
Almost like a Vegas version. But advertising and entertainment has just permeated every aspect of life, and it keeps everyone distracted. And but even the consumerism in this world is like super depressing. Like the luxury car that everybody wants, so it's a complete piece of shit.
Yeah.
Total piece of shit.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It doesn't seem to have any utility. Gets horrible gas mileage. Doesn't seem like it goes fast. And it's called the 6,000 Sucks. You know? Right. So it's like, to Verhoeven, America is this place that's like gripped by consumerism, but even the stuff we're buying is like not good.
He's not very subtle with his commentary on America with this movie, but subtlety is not something that Paul Verhoeven specializes in.
No,
anymore.
we're not here for the subtlety.
No.
RoboCop is not a subtle movie, but it is a great portrayal of how technology has interacted with our lives, and it's just seeped into every aspect of our existence, and it's been very profitable for a few people, but for the most part, it's like it hasn't really made life that much better.
No.
You know, a lot of times it doesn't work right, or, it kills somebody accidentally. It makes a simple process overly complicated. It makes a lot of things demonstrably worse.
Do you think the idea of RoboCop as a premise, independent of Verhoeven's commentary on America, is a good idea if it were more well-conceived than it is here?
Now, do you mean like the RoboCop with the guy inside?
Yeah.
I don't know, because like on some level you're like, well, I'm kind of for letting the machines do the work that nobody else wants to do.
Right.
I guess it depends on what you want the cop to do, for one thing. But also, as RoboCop is conceived, not the original, but the one with the person inside, like you're taking a person and turning them into a consumer product, a military hardware, essentially.
Right.
You know, and I don't know, like that's a fucked up thing. Like even if you get their consent, that's not a good look. So I'm not really. I can't say I'm for that. I don't know.
Have you seen the remake?
No.
It's certainly not better than this movie, which in this movie is great.
Yeah.
But they do spend a little bit more time grappling with that notion that this guy has been essentially turned into hardware.
Yeah.
And just the emotional components of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's obviously in the original too.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, it's kind of baked into everything else. It's like, this is just how America works. Like, we just turn you into a product and then we figure out how to make money off of that, which is actually what social media has done, right? Where it's like, it's turned the people who thought they were the consumers into the product.
Yes.
And that's kind of what America is. It's like, it's just a market that's being sold to business, you know? But to get back to Blood, which is what we're talking about here,
no shortage of it.
The original cut of RoboCop, like you said, was so bloody that it was rated X. This is before NC-17, so they gave it an X rating. And they had to they resubmitted it 8 times or maybe up to 11, depending on who you ask.
Wow.
Before they finally got an R rating.
I didn't know that it was that many different cuts of the movie that were submitted.
But mostly they just shortened the death scenes. There's not like a big. I don't know if I've seen the original in a long time. Or not. I mean the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
So I don't know for sure, but I think what they did was they just shortened a couple of the death scenes and made them a little bit less graphic.
Right.
But they didn't stop people from getting shot or have the blood. Like they still had it. It was just shorter looks at it, which in a lot of ways makes it more palatable.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's more cartoonish. It's more just like what the fuck is going on here? Yeah. Look, you can see the fakeness of it.
Right. Yeah. When you take that out, I don't know. There's it becomes a little bit more real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Fight Club when Fincher said they had to cut out a big part of the scene where Jared Leto is getting his face bashed in.
Yeah.
And what they replaced it with just the sound of him getting his face bashed in. And they actually showed a lot less of it. And he was like, they allowed that. He's like, but everyone that's seen both of them agrees that it's like way more brutal just like hearing it.
Oh, yeah.
And not seeing it as much. You
Well,
know?
theater of the mind. You can't help but to imagine. And whatever you're imagining is more grotesque than I'm sure what they were
Exactly. So I mean, but like this is how those rating systems work. They're kind of silly, And so Verhoeven was like, well, like the original cut made it seem more comedic, He's like, my kids thought it was funny. I don't know how old his kids were at the time. They probably shouldn't have been watching it, but he's like, the original cut, my kids thought was funny, and then they saw the R version, and they got scared by it. Believe that if you want, but,
right.
But we have both versions here at the store. You can get either one.
You be the judge.
One thing I noticed is that all the violence in this movie is with guns.
Yes.
Every single death in this movie is by gun, except for that guy that gets exploded by the car.
There is that. Yeah.
Which even that's not just blood. There's a lot of stuff mixed in there, but like that's a very bloody scene when he gets plowed over by a car.
Yeah.
So RoboCop has plenty of blood. The original had too much, according to the MPAA. It's funny, it's violent, it's got a lot to say. It's got a badass robot that kills dirtbag criminals and dirtbag corporate executives alike. And I'm adding it to the staff recommendation this week under blood.
I love it. And you mentioned the scene where the guy gets exploded by the car. And I had read that Verhoeven, in the process of resubmitting this, refused to take that scene out because it got the biggest laughs from test audiences, which, it sheds some light into what his perspective was on this film to begin with. And
it's funny. I mean, that's a funny part of the movie when that's a funny character anyway. And then to see him turn into this monster for like a brief moment, and then he just turns into jelly. Right. It's a really funny scene.
It is. Peter Weller is great. I can't imagine anyone else as RoboCop. I mean, he's so good. Yeah, great cast. This is a classic film. It still holds up.
Yeah, it's one of the best science fiction movies of the 80s for sure.
Yeah, and Verhoeven has quite a few of those to his name. I mean, he went from this to Total Recall, and that was another banger. So, well, fine pick. You don't need to see the remake. This is all the RoboCop you need, except for the sequels, which are still better than the remake.
I don't even know if I've seen the sequels.
Yeah?
Didn't they make the second one like a kid's movie?
It's been a long time.
They had a cartoon. I know that.
They did have a...
Okay.
They did. Well, fun stuff. I'm going to begin my first entry into the blood category with 1982's The Thing, which is in the Don't Upset the Blood section of the store. Back of the box, in the winter of 1982, a 12-man research team at a remote Antarctic research station discovers an alien buried in the snow for over 100,000 years. Once unfrozen, the form-changing alien wreaks havoc, creates terror, and becomes one of them. Tagline, "Man is the warmest place to hide." I think that tagline is a
wow.
fucking stupendous tagline.
That is a really good tag.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about this movie.
That's fucking great.
Yeah, this isn't just my favorite horror movie. This is one of my all-time favorites in any genre. I saw this with my dad when I was far too young to see it. It was on TV in the late 80s. And yeah, more than 40 years later, still scares the bejesus out of me. It's as good as it was on release day. Carpenter, master of horror. He's got an impressive resume. And I'm a big fan of the Halloween franchise, but I think this is Carpenter's best movie.
I was actually thinking about that today. To me, this is an obvious 5-star movie. This is a fucking ripper from beginning to end. It's a fucking classic. And I still think it might be my third favorite John Carpenter movie.
Really?
Yeah. I think Halloween is probably my favorite.
Okay.
And They Live is it's just my speed, I think. It's just one of those movies that's on my level. And I think I might like it a little bit more than this, but it's so hard to choose because they're all 5-star classics.
You can't criticize them. I mean, they're all Carpenter is just a master of his craft. Now, interestingly, this was a flop when it debuted. I mean, critics hated it. Fans didn't see it. The movie didn't find its audience until it arrived on video. And part of the reason for that is it was released the same year as E.T., and the world was more interested in falling in love with a cute alien that ate Reese's Pieces rather than an alien that sprouts legs from a dismembered head.
Yeah. I don't know what was going on in the early 80s.
I don't either. Back of the Box does a good job, but I do want to talk about the premise for a moment. So the movie opens with the rare helicopter versus dog chase. We don't know why the dog is being chased and shot at. We do learn that both the copter and the pooch come from a neighboring Norwegian Antarctic base where this mysterious shape-shifting alien has already wreaked havoc on that entire team of researchers. So the dog is the alien, and when it arrives at the American base, they bring it in without giving it a second thought, and from there, things go to shit pretty quickly, and it starts inhabiting different members of the American crew. We get a healthy dose of blood, paranoia, claustrophobia. I'm just going to, before I get into why I chose this, I'm just going to give a few quotes from the critics when this was released. So Ebert called it a barf bag movie. Just a what? Yeah, he said, just a geek show, gross out movie in which teenagers can dare one another to watch the screen. One reviewer called it the quintessential moron movie of the 80s. It was referred to as instant junk. Yeah.
Who? What?
I know.
What were they watching?
I have no idea. It boggles my mind that.
It's so weird because we obviously were not old enough to see this movie at the time.
No.
So we came to it much later in life, and so it's hard to say. Like, I mean, the vibe in the '80s must have just been different. Like early '80s.
Yeah.
What movie were they watching?
I don't know. I can't understand it because a lot of the criticism was leveled at the effects, which, some critics were saying it's just too obsessed with grossing you out or throwing tentacles on the screen or something. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's still this just sense of dread that permeates this movie. From the moment that dog arrives to the last shot of the movie.
How many effects were in E.T.?
Right,
What are we talking about?
Right.
Come on.
I don't understand it. So why did I choose this? Lots of reasons, but I'm going to cite a particular scene as my reason for choosing this for the theme of blood. So for most of the movie, the researchers have no idea how to determine who from their group has been assimilated by the alien. Eventually, they decide to draw blood from everyone in their group and touch the samples with a scalding hot wire. And the thinking is that when separated from a host, the alien has like a survival instinct and is going to fight to keep itself alive. And the test works, makes for one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. In fact, it was that scene in the script that sold Carpenter on making it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Speaking of the script, this is written by a guy named Bill Lancaster, who only has 3 features to his name. He has The Thing, the original Bad News Bears, and the sequel to the Bad News Bears.
Wait, did they use the same script for the... Did the second Bad News Bears movie get made during a writer's strike? Is that why Linklater made that?
It might have.
I didn't even... Maybe. Unless maybe they
had
a
big gap.
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah.
But Bill Lancaster, he's got two notes.
Because that's how The Taking of Pelham 123 got remade by Tony Scott, because it was a writer's strike, and they're like, well, we got the script laying around, we can just shoot this, and so they just shot the old script.
Yes, and you know, for as limited as this guy's resume is, I think this is an incredibly well written movie. It's funny at times. It's, I mean, quotable. You know, you get one of my favorite lines from a horror movie when MacReady delivers the quote, "Nobody trusts anybody now, and we're all very tired."
Yeah,
which is just a fucking.
It's just a cool ass movie.
It's so good.
It's a beautiful movie too.
Oh, is
this Dean Cundey? This is 82.
I don't know.
I think it is. But.
It might be. And it looks as good as ever. I mean, it's just been re-released in 4K, and the transfer is phenomenal. This is a great case of a movie that still holds up because the practical effects were so good. I think if this were relying on CG, and there are some matte paintings in this, but you know, they're almost indistinguishable from, you know, the environment. And yeah, the practical effects are just phenomenal.
Amazing.
I held off on talking about the cast until getting into why I chose this, because it's really stupendous. Obviously, Kurt Russell is here. He's phenomenal. He was the last person to be cast. There was a lot of discussion about who should play the part of MacReady.
Cool in this movie.
He's so cool. And cold. He's very cool.
Everybody's cool in this movie.
Yeah.
And very cold.
Keith David is here in his first feature film. He's phenomenal. Wilford fucking Brimley, phenomenal. So Thomas Waits, who plays the character of Windows, he showed up at the audition with a pair of sunglasses on and said to Carpenter, "This is my look. I'm going to wear sunglasses, and I want everyone to call me Windows." That wasn't the character's name, but they went with it. Yeah. And fucking phenomenal decision.
Love it.
The music is great. This is one of the rare John Carpenter movies that he didn't score himself. They brought in Ennio Morricone, who did his best Carpenter impression. And in spite of how legendary the Halloween score is, this might be my favorite score of any of Carpenter's movies, because it moves the movie.
I mean, he's one of the greatest composers of all time.
Indeed.
So,
I will say there is one tiny aspect of this movie that I do not like. And it's the fact that the very first shot of the movie sees the alien spaceship flying toward Earth. And I do not think you need that. I think you can just start with a helicopter chase and then have the audience learn about the alien as the researchers do. And it's an even better movie, which, I mean, it's practically perfect in my opinion. Average is a 4.3 on Letterboxd. That's 0.7 points too low in my opinion. But I would say just rent this. Relish in the 4K restoration. Take in the practical effects.
You're not going to see much higher ratings on Letterboxd.
That's true.
It takes everybody into account.
That's true.
4.3 is about as high as you can get. I might have seen a 4.4. I mean, Citizen Kane is probably like a 4.3,
right.
4.4.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not going to get much higher, and I think deservedly so.
I agree. I mean, it's there's a good amount of blood. There's a whole lot of suspense. I'd say cuddle up with your dog, because you're going to want to, and just let Carpenter cook.
Yeah, one of the greats. Okay, I'm going to bring us up into a more recent year of 2020. The movie is Freaky.
Oh, boy.
You can find this in the makeovers section of the store. Back of the box. A mystical ancient dagger causes a notorious serial killer to magically switch bodies with a 17-year-old girl. Tagline, basic switch, killer new look.
Not a bad tagline.
Yeah,
not a bad tagline.
I like that. In other words, this movie is Freaky Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Yeah, I assume they couldn't call it that for obvious reasons, but that's what this movie is.
100%.
It's a slasher film crossed with a body switch comedy.
Which is not the director's first pass at taking things that melding genres in order to create a horror film.
No.
I'm sure you're going to talk about that.
Christopher Landon is the writer-director. I think he wrote this.
Yes.
He made Happy Death Day, which is basically Groundhog Day and a slasher movie mixed up, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, I liked Happy Death Day. I might have liked it a little bit more than this.
Interesting.
Maybe.
In this, Vince Vaughn plays the Butcher, who is essentially Jason Voorhees. He even wears a similar mask in the first part of this movie.
Yes.
Catherine Newton is the high schooler who switches bodies with him, and I don't think it's a coincidence that she has a very young Lindsay Lohan look to her. But yeah, so this takes a good premise, and then it really just executes the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to like about this, but I think the reason I keep coming back to it is Vince Vaughn's performance.
He's fucking hilarious. This is the funniest he's been in a long time.
A long time. He has this amazing combination of masculinity and flamboyance.
Yes.
So he's very manly, but he's able to act very convincingly like a teenage girl.
Yes. And there's some physical acting that goes into that
100%
absolutely helps pull it off.
I don't think a lot of guys could have pulled this off. I mean, there's not a lot of 50-year-old men that could, convincingly play a 17-year-old girl. Right. And I love the reveal of his character when he finds out, or I guess she finds out she's in his body.
Yes.
It's such a great reveal. But he inhabits his character to the degree that he's able to have emotional beats later in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, he has like a scene where he reads a poem as this girl reading this poem to her crush. And then they have like a makeout scene later. And it's just like, I believe it. It makes sense. Like, I believe it's that girl. And meanwhile, it's Vince Vaughn, who's 50 and like looking, I would say, extra disheveled.
Yeah.
Like, he definitely put on a few pounds.
Yeah.
I like the first scene where he's wearing the mask and it's the murder scene. I'm thinking like, whoa, because I haven't seen Vince Vaughn in a movie in a while, and I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, well, that's clearly a body double, and they got one who's too fat. And then he takes the mask off, and it's Vince Vaughn. I'm like, oh, okay. Vince Vaughn like let himself go for this part, like just to like make it even more, because he's like, he hasn't shaved, like he's kind of gross looking in every way possible.
Yeah.
But it's like perfect for the 17-year-old girl that he's playing.
Vince Vaughn for this feels like he is channeling the Russell Crowe energy from Unhinged, because in both cases I was like, wow, they just ate some Twinkies.
But Catherine Newton, I think, does a pretty good job of playing the murderous dude.
Yeah, she does a good job.
I think she does a good job. I really liked when he went to school in her body, and he like apparently took the time to put on makeup and stuff.
Right.
I loved, and great jacket, by the way.
Oh,
we're big fans of jackets here. Great jacket.
That's a great jacket. Yes.
But yeah, horror comedy is just like one of those genres that we don't get a lot of like great ones.
Yeah.
But when we do, it's the most fun genre there is. It's like the two most fun genres, and then you put them together, and when it works, it cooks.
You've brought more than one horror comedy to the shelf, because you had the found footage one of the guy that stayed in the haunted house. The name of that movie escapes me.
Dead Stream.
Yes.
Also, our first episode, I had Seed of Chucky, which right. I would definitely consider a horror comedy.
Yeah, indeed.
But so this movie never explicitly says so, but it seems like Catherine Newton's blood getting on the magic knife is what makes the body switch happen. You know, in the movie they say like, oh, we have to make sure that we stab him or stab her or something. But to me, it's like it's obvious it's the blood that's doing it.
Yeah.
That is what calls the dark forces into action. Also, the kills in this movie are, I would say, pretty bloody.
I was hoping you were going to talk about those, because I thought not only are they bloody, but they're well executed. Mm-hmm. You know, not lazy. They're more creative than what you normally get from like the Friday the 13th movies.
Definitely.
Just well done.
Well done. They're usually, most of them are pretty funny in a way.
Yeah.
So the blood plays a critical role in the plot. It plays a critical role in the horror and the comedy of the movie. And it features Vince Vaughn in I think, a great performance. I think my second favorite Vince Vaughn performance after Swingers. And blood plays a prominent role in the whole thing. And so I'm putting it up on the staff recommendation shelf this week for blood.
This was a good one. I'm excited to see what Christopher Landon does next. I hope that
I think he's doing the next Scream movie, maybe.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure about
the one that just came out.
No, the next, like
the
Scream
next
7, I think. Is what
Gotcha.
And he already made a Happy Death Day 2, right?
He did. Yeah. Well, this was fun. More fun than I expected it to be, because you see guys like Vince Vaughn show up in movies today in the same way that Mel Gibson shows up in movies, and I expected this to
Not
just
the
be
same way as Mel
not
Gibson.
the same. I expected it to be the same as Mel Gibson, and it was not. It was Vince Vaughn in classic Vince Vaughn form.
This is a movie I'm definitely going to return to over and over again over the years just to see Vince Vaughn play this part.
Yes, yes. Well, fine choice. I'm glad it's up on the shelf. For my next movie, I'm jumping 10 years ahead of The Thing to 1992, and my pick is Cronos from the Don't Drink the Bathroom Blood section of the store. Back to the box synopsis. This is a little bit long, but I'll get through it quick. Faced with his own mortality, an ingenious alchemist tried to perfect an invention that would provide him with the key to eternal life. It was called the Cronos device. When he died more than 400 years later, he took the secrets of this remarkable device to the grave with him. Now, an elderly antiques dealer has found the hellish machine hidden in a statue and learns about its incredible powers. The more he uses the device, the younger he becomes. But nothing comes without a price. Life After Death is just the beginning of this nerve-shattering thriller that unfolds and the fountain of youth turns bloody. So there is no tagline to this, which I guess is better than a bad tagline, but no tagline to speak of.
There were plenty of lines that were not. That was a
Yeah.
that was a short story you just read.
Right. Fortunately, it doesn't give away any real spoilers. This is Guillermo del Toro's first feature film, and I'll kick things off by saying that it's a bit rough around the edges at times. I don't know that it's aged especially well, but it's an interesting watch. I think a unique take on a vampire story. A great example of Del Toro showing the skill set and style that he'd later become known for. And there's a lot here that I think become trademarks of Del Toro's approach to filmmaking and storytelling. There's a young girl helping to anchor the story. We got some insects, some body horror. It's full of things that have come to become
Everything you love.
Yeah, all the things you love about Del Toro. The back of the box certainly tells us all that we need to know. I would say this is kind of a bit of a vampire story mixed with an insect-forward take on the portrait of Dorian Gray. Story's a bit disjointed, but it's definitely original. I would say most of the cast is unknown to American audiences with the exception of Ron Perlman, who plays the nephew of the millionaire who's trying to get his hands on the Cronos device from the antique dealer. So this is predominantly a Spanish language film. Perlman's character was meant to speak fluent Spanish, but his attempt at delivering Spanish dialogue was so terrible that Del Toro rewrote the character to make him like an American who's been relocated unwillingly to Mexico. And so he and his uncle speak English, but otherwise Spanish language. Why did I choose this? So I think it's great to see a legendary director come out the gate with a memorable debut, and in spite of its flaws, I think Cronos is better than most directors' first films. And blood plays a role here. You know, the Cronos device.
It does.
Yeah. Cronos device is this golden beetle that you wind up and hold. The legs come out, needles protrude, it grips whatever part of the body it's up against. And then if the device is on the body long enough, another needle emerges, piercing the skin and drawing blood.
It's a very complicated process.
It is.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, because once the blood is in the thing, it's feeding an eternal insect that's living within this thing.
Roach or something?
Yeah.
But like, how does that work?
I don't know.
It's a magic roach.
Yeah, definitely a wacky contraption, but also a bloody one. So once the antique dealer who possesses the Cronos device begins to use it more regularly, he does begin to age in reverse. At the same time, he develops a thirst for blood that becomes more difficult to quench. I mentioned at the top in reference to the section we keep this in. There is a memorable scene where the antique dealer is licking blood off of the bathroom floor, which is doubly gross.
It's so gross.
It's
gross.
very gross.
Can you imagine wanting blood so bad that you would put your tongue on the bathroom floor?
Nope. I wouldn't put my tongue on the floor for anything.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to imagine a situation.
Yeah.
I guess being a vampire is that situation, though.
Sometimes you got to eat. As the movie progresses, we do get some additional body horror as the character becomes more and more dependent on the device. And I think that's kind of what this movie's about. It feels like an addiction story as much as it is a horror movie. The antique dealer can't quit this thing, and ultimately that leads to his undoing. How did you feel about this?
You know, it was kind of a mixed bag for me. I thought it was a little bit too whimsical. Mm-hmm. It was like a whimsical, like, I don't know, Harry Potter world, and then we got these weird vampire things happening. I liked it. It had some style to it.
Yeah.
You know, it was a little too old-timey, maybe.
I think that's something that Del Toro learned how to do better once he got to movies like Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And, you know, like melding that whimsical fairy tale component with a world that can be frightening is a tricky thing to pull off. And I agree with you. I don't think that he does it especially well here.
I think if this movie would have explored a little bit something to do with how this bug thing works.
Yeah.
So, you know, just to give it a little bit more, instead of it being just a magic box, you're like, oh, it's a mechanical bug that just like puts sharp things in you, and then magic happens.
Right.
It's like, oh, all right, well, like, I need a little bit more than that.
Right. And it feels like they're setting you up to get more of that because they take you into this device. You see the little creature inside getting fed the blood, and it's like, well, okay, tell me more.
And also, like, this guy, you know, designed it, right? He designed this amazing machine that turns you into a vampire using some sort of bug.
Right.
What was that process like? Like how many versions of this thing did he have to build? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, give me a little bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you make one with a bird first?
Yeah. How did he find this bug? Like, can you use any bug?
Right.
Like how, there's a lot that could have been explored here, and I don't think they explored enough of it.
I agree. I think they tease the mythology in a way that leaves you wishing for more.
It's like, here's a science fiction premise, but it was very much in the background.
Right.
And it's just more just like, this guy likes to put his tongue on the floor of the bathroom.
Yes. I did like the use of color in this film. You see the palette associated with main character change as he uses the device more and more. It's subtle but pretty effective. Critics loved this more than audiences, in fact. It received heaps of acclaim upon release, even given the Criterion treatment, which I thought was a little bit odd.
It's Del Toro.
Yeah. On Letterboxd, this averages a 3.4, which is about right, maybe a little higher than I would give it. I would say if you're a fan of Del Toro, this is definitely a worthy watch just to see kind of how he got his start. And compared to more expected selections, it's a novel entry for the blood theme with this week's staff recommendation shelf. So I'm putting it up there. I'd say give it a shot. It's a little different.
Yeah. You know, it's not my favorite movie, but it's definitely a good look at early Del Toro. It's a very different vampire movie.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no vampire movie that I've seen that's anything like this.
I agree. And
whether or not that means you're going to like it, it's up to you.
Right. And, you know, the vampire genre is full of movies that are essentially telling the same story. Mm-hmm. So to see someone take another stab at it is...
I didn't even realize it was a vampire movie until the bathroom scene, I think.
Right.
So I hope we're not spoiling anything.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think all right.
It's an old movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of old movies, taking us back to 1974.
All right.
The movie is Death Wish.
Whew.
This is filed under Bloodlust.
Yes.
Back of the box. After his wife is murdered by street punks, a pacifistic New York City architect becomes a one-man vigilante squad, prowling the streets for would-be muggers after dark. Tagline, Vigilante, City Style, Judge, Jury, and Executioner. Which, yeah. Again, that's what a tagline is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't know what about those things makes it City Style. Right. That could just as easily be the Wild West, but okay.
Yeah.
Death Wish is director Michael Winner's landmark action thriller starring Charles Bronson. This was the beginning of a franchise that lasted 5 movies.
Right.
Up until 1994. And there was a remake in 2018 by Eli Roth that starred Bruce Willis.
Eli Roth directed that?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen it. I probably won't see it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back. I'm not really interested in late period Bruce Willis at this point, especially like knowing what we know.
Yeah.
Going into this movie, though, Charles Bronson was one of, if not like the top box office star in Hollywood.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
It's very crazy because if you think about it, because like to us, Charles Bronson was the guy who in 1994 put out Death Wish 5. You know,
Yeah.
We know him from The Simpsons, and it was just he was this old guy, and like I didn't really know who he was beyond that.
Yeah.
So in this movie, in a lot of ways, defined the rest of his career because he kind of just became this guy. He was like this generation's version of Liam Neeson.
Yes.
The opening of this movie is brutal. It's a brutal opening.
Oh my God. Yeah.
In addition to murdering his wife, the so-called street punks also assault his daughter, and she ends up institutionalized and basically never speaking again.
I mean, you can understand why the incident turns Charles Bronson's character into the guy that he becomes.
Yeah.
It's
it's
brutal.
Yeah. And plus, like, the mental health care in the 70s seems to leave a lot to be desired.
Right.
You know, it seemed like they were like one step ahead of like lobotomies, you know? It was like, well, we don't do that anymore, but we're just going to like lock her in her room. And like, what were they doing to her? Like, it didn't seem like much of anything. Like, we'll just give her like...
They weren't helping her.
Benzodrine until she falls asleep or something. Mm-hmm. So the way Charles Bronson deals with his grief is by wandering the streets of New York until someone tries to rob him, and then he murders that person. This is actually not too far off from the Batman origin story, though, in a lot of ways, because you know he's the vigilante guy. He almost has his own Commissioner Gordon too at a certain point.
Yeah.
But this set the standard for 1970s urban vigilantism.
Interesting you say that because I could not stop thinking about Ms. 45 when I was watching this. I mean, there's
very similar,
some strong parallels, you know?
I think that was definitely like a different take on this story.
For sure.
But Charles Bronson, when he made this movie, he was about 50 years old.
He looks it.
He does look it, but he also has like a cool dude energy about him.
Yeah.
You know, and it made me think about the fact that in the 70s, I think people were just cooler than they are now. Like, I think the 70s is probably when people were the coolest. Because, like, the 50s, no way. 60s, nah. 70s, it was just like, there was like this overall energy of everything that was just kind of like, I don't know, the clothes, the jackets, the hairstyle, the attitudes, the music. The cars were kind of bullshit, but...
Yeah.
I mean, like the muscle cars were cool, but everything else just like was terrible.
Yes.
But I think a lot of shit was not good in the 70s, which is why people had to be cool to just deal with it.
Yep.
But this isn't really the case of Bronson going through a traumatic event and then immediately going apeshit and then like blowing people away willy-nilly. He kind of like slowly works his way into the violence. You know, the idea of even using a gun like isn't even something he's thinking about. He has a roll of quarters and a sock, and that was his weapon of choice. But then he sees people with guns at that shootout in the old West Town. He's like, you can shoot people.
Maybe I'll try that.
And then that guy he has a business relationship with gives him a gun. He's like, well, I guess I have a gun now, and so he decides to use it. But this also isn't a revenge movie.
No.
Like, we never see the guys again.
No.
He's I guess after. He just decides to kill random people.
Yeah, it seems to be a movie about how the incident just changes Charles Bronson's character.
Yeah.
And anyone in his path is
Yeah.
not going to be around long.
But I also think this is more nuanced than it's given credit for. Because... especially around the time that it came out, it was basically viewed by critics as condoning vigilante violence. And, you know, the movie's definitely not against it.
Right.
You know, it has a point of view, but I wouldn't say it takes a position on what's happening.
Interesting, because I feel like there is a very conservative undercurrent woven into this movie around how to fix the problems with the world. More cops, you know,
Or it's almost like, fuck the cops, we'll do it ourselves.
there is that. And it's interesting to me that this guy who is definitely a liberal is the one who takes up arms and, you know.
Okay, so we know what's driving him to this violence, right?
Right.
We know how it's affecting him. I don't think the movie endorses what he's doing. It just seems to be working for him.
Yeah.
But I say that there's a, quote, bleeding heart liberal reading of his actions because, you know, he could have easily moved to Connecticut, like his son-in-law says, just like live a suburban life and like go to the city for work and go live in the suburbs. And then they even show a scene where they show like the regular people of New York who are like, we're sick of this shit too. Like that old lady was just like, I'm just trying to get home. And so like this guy tried to rob me. So I attacked him with a hat pin. And so I think he's refusing to live by the we, they framing of the city. Cause like he could easily be like, well, we work in the city and they live there. And he's like, bullshit, I live here too. He's like, I'm not just doing this for myself and for the rich people. He's like, I'm doing this for the city, for the people that live here, you know?
Yeah. It feels as if he's not going to be further defeated by what happens at the beginning of this movie by leaving the city.
Right.
He's ready to just dig in.
No, he's like, no, I'm gonna do what it takes.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, the movies of the 70s were not afraid to be morally ambiguous.
Right.
You know, they're like, he wants to build his community. You know, that's what he's trying to do. And he's doing it for like the people that live there. And he's doing it by betraying some of his values. You know?
Right.
You know, once Charles Bronson has made the transition from bleeding heart to vigilante, he is truly out for blood. And so that's the way I'm looking at it for the topic this week.
I think that's a fair interpretation.
He's also, in a way, protecting his bloodline. Yeah. You know, because he's had his family attacked, and so he's got to do what he needs to do to protect that. And that's his blood. Yes. And this is an iconic Charles Bronson performance. It's a great vigilante movie from the 70s, and I think it definitely deserves a spot on the shelf this week for blood.
Well, the bloodlust angle is one that is a prime example of how the blood theme can take shape. So I'm glad you chose this. I was not ready for what this movie gave me because I hadn't seen it, and so I watched it for this, and it's a brutal watch at points.
It really is.
But yeah, it's not a movie that you expect to see to have come from 1972. I don't know. I mean, like it's four. Yeah, four.
But yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, I think it's one of those movies that has gained a different reputation than what it is because of the 4 sequels and the fact that by the time the 5th one came out, like Charles Bronson was like, you know, a kind of a parody of himself from the 70s, you know?
Yeah. I think it's also an interesting movie to watch in the context of the world we live in today. Politically speaking, just in terms of all the videos you see on YouTube and Reddit of people fighting one another at the drop of a hat. But
also like it makes you think about because you know, you can complain about crime all you want nowadays, but like New York City in the 70s was
rough.
Was legitimately rough, you know. But if you're trying to solve your problems, whatever they are, like sometimes you have to, you know, you can't be so by the book of things. You can't be religious about it. You have to be like, well, some things sometimes you have to bend your values a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe you shouldn't be murdering people in the streets. But you know, but also maybe like one of those guys for a little bit in your town might help things out a little bit.
Well, fine choice for your third entry to the blood theme for this week's staff recommendation shelf. I'm going to take us a little bit forward in time to 1992. This is my second 1992 movie. It's very different from my other 1992
pivotal
movie.
Year.
Yeah.
For Bob.
So
young Bob.
Right. My third and final choice is Dead Alive, otherwise known as Brain Dead, from the bloody hell section of the store. Back to the buck synopsis. When a Sumatran rat monkey bites Lionel Cosgrove's mother, she's transformed into a zombie and begins killing and transforming the entire town, while Lionel races to keep things under control. Tagline, some things won't stay down even after they die. Which tells you what you're in store for with this movie.
I didn't realize that this movie's more known as Brain Dead than Dead Alive. It's Brain Dead on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too because I grew up knowing it as Dead Alive. I mean,
me too.
That's the North American title. Interestingly, the Spanish language title for this movie is Tu madre se ha comido a mi perro, which literally translates to Your Mother Ate My Dog. Which dogs don't fare well in two of my three movies this week, which
is that your new thing?
I hope not. I love dogs. But yeah, those fucking Sumatran rat monkeys, you just can't trust them.
Absolutely not.
This is Peter Jackson's third feature film, and it has the reputation of being the bloodiest movie of all time. This one's hard to find in 2023. It's on
YouTube.
It's on YouTube. It was widely available on VHS, saw only a limited release on DVD. I don't think it ever made it to Blu-ray or streaming in the sense of like you can buy it from Apple TV or something like that.
Yeah, there's rights issues. There's something going on there. It's hard to find.
Yeah, but it's for free on YouTube.
It's hard to find. It's hard to pay for, but you can find it on YouTube for free.
We'll rent it to you.
Yeah, and of course we'll rent it. We'll definitely take your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Dead Alive is a gross movie. It's more gross than it is scary. It's also definitely funny. This movie's not trying to take itself seriously at all. I think it's actively trying to make audiences laugh at certain moments. But, it should be mentioned that there are unquantifiable amounts of blood on display. There's also a lot of other fluids and goops. And
the bloody part, the blood is like the least gross part.
Yeah.
The pus and the there's a lot of
unidentifiable substances.
Yeah.
I
think that stuff left over from the guy that got plowed over by the car in RoboCop. Yes. A lot of that stuff just squirting all over the place.
This is not for the faint of heart. And
not for the faint of stomach.
Oh yeah.
It's not a thing you want to eat around.
No. I saw this a bunch of times in the 90s. And then I didn't return to it for all of the 2000s. Yeah. And I did not remember how gross this movie is.
Yeah. That's part of the fun of it, at least back in the 90s when we were like young people and we could be like, there's a fun in how outrageous it is.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's kind of remarkable that this hasn't been re-released. I know you mentioned that there were rights issues, but this garnered a devoted cult following. In fact, this outgrossed Batman Returns in New Zealand, where the film was originally. I mean, it was shot, filmed, released there.
Yeah.
But yeah, why did I choose this? I would say when it comes to gross, bloody films, this is the undisputed king of them all. In the final act, which sees the main character literally mowing them down with a lawnmower, blood was pumped at a pace of 5 gallons per second, which is inconceivable, especially given how long that scene lasts.
That's a fuckload of blood.
Yeah. This is another case of practical effects carrying this film. These aren't realistic in the way that The Thing is trying to be. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think that a lot of these effects couldn't be less realistic. But they're pulled off with a style that's wholly unique. And I think you can see why Peter Jackson was pegged as the guy that would go on to create orcs that populated the Lord of the Rings movies. Some people probably would say that this movie hasn't aged well, but I don't think it's even representative of the time that it was released. I mean, it's Jackson's style of effects and filmmaking are really unique, and for that reason, I think as wacky and weird and fun today as it was in '92. It doesn't feel like it's aged. It just feels like
I don't feel different. Like it's aged. It's different. It's at times it almost seems like more of a gag reel.
Yes.
Where it's or a demo reel where it's like they came up with all these bits.
Yes.
Like okay, we can do like an eyeball thing, and we can do a
blender thing.
We can do a face thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And so they built a movie around this story. That's what it seems like.
It does.
You know?
It does. And I mean, when you put all of that together, it makes for a very demented watch.
Yeah. It to me it was going back. I haven't seen this movie in like 25 years probably.
Yeah.
And going back to it, I didn't even like I the blood and the gore and stuff. I was like totally down with.
Yeah.
The rest of it was a little bit too, and I hope this isn't offensive to New Zealanders. Cute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just like a little bit.
Yeah.
Everything they do is a little too cute.
I did see one review on Letterboxd that said, "I'm from New Zealand, and this is the most New Zealand thing that I've ever seen."
Yeah, it's very gruesomely cute.
Yeah, yeah.
They're also, it leans heavily into that squishy zombie trope.
Oh, yeah.
Which I always find hilarious because it's like, oh, just because they're a zombie, now their skull is mush. Like, no, that's
Right.
not how the world works.
No.
And that's kind of what they do in this movie, too.
Yeah, that had at some point been established as just like, this is how zombies function. But I don't like that. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think it works.
It was a thing in The Walking Dead where it's like 3 seconds after someone dies, you can just like stab a knife through their skull.
Right.
You can't
yeah.
do that.
No, that
Like,
doesn't, doesn't work that way.
Also, I didn't realize this, back in the 90s when I watched this movie a lot, I didn't realize like how much of an Evil Dead influence there is here.
Mm-hmm.
They basically, it seems like they were like, okay, let's do the Evil Dead thing, but let's make it like really gross, like twice as much stuff.
Yeah. It's not even a case of turning it up to 11. It's like just like
Yeah.
turning the dial off of the knob. Yeah, so I would say there's probably nothing I can say to prepare people for what's in store if you haven't seen this. But I will mention Peter Rainer's review from the Los Angeles Times. He said of the movie, "It's the most hilariously disgusting movie ever made. It makes something like The Reanimator seem like a UNESCO documentary about Mother Teresa." Which, that about sums it up.
Yeah. But it's also so over the top that you, at some point, just kind of hardly notice it.
Right. Yeah. I know I have a reputation for bringing perhaps one too many people-eating movies to the shelf, but I think we can both agree that the zombie subgenre gets a pass.
That doesn't count, but it's close.
It's close. I know. I felt like I was
close
flirting.
twice this
Yeah, I know. Indeed. But still not willing to go back to that well.
Good for now.
Rob, this is hands down the bloodiest staff recommendation shelf we've ever assembled. And the 6 movies we chose are RoboCop, The Thing, Freaky, Cronos, Death Wish, and Dead Alive.
If you want to drop us a line, the comments and suggestions box is right here at the store next to the register. But if you're not in the area, you can go to rewindvideopod.com to get on our mailing list or to connect with us online.
After we clean up the bloody mess that is this episode, we're going to set our sights on our next theme, which is a unique one. So bad, it's bad. We'll have 6 movies that we actually do not recommend.
Yeah, do not watch.
Do not watch. It'll be an interesting episode. In the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch, and we will see you next time.
Be kind, recommend. Satan. This is for you, Satan. It's all for you.